Good morning. This is Monday, beginning of September, and in the States, Labor Day. So, special treat for everybody. I'm working on a holiday because, not everybody who watches this is in the States, and so there it is. Yeah. And for me, since I'm retired, a holiday isn't terribly much different than any other day. Or I should say, I guess it's fair to say that every other day isn't terribly much different from a holiday. There's still stuff to do around the house and, all sorts of stuff to do around the house and things. But I'm just muttering here because why not, I guess. Today's going to be an incoherent day, I can tell already. Prepare yourself for incoherence. And what I'm going to be doing is continuing to work on this, the whatever that was, the command bridge for the original series. It's an interesting kind of fun model to put together, and I thought I'd do something that was just a little bit less demanding, I guess, in terms of having to take it seriously than some of the other things I've been working on. So I'm working on this, and so far I have done most of step one. There. I made the circle, and I painted it the color of the indoor-outdoor carpeting that is on it. That's what it looks like. It's probably what it was on the set. And what I want to do is I could just simplify this whole thing and not spend a whole lot of time on detail, but I'm making models that look pretty good, even this one. So what I'm going to do, because if you look at the box top, here's the box top, the edges here, behind the steps, the edges are dark, so the carpeting is just on the top. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint these edges underneath the carpeting, and I'm going to do that by a process. Itchy eye. So the process for that is that I thought, well, that's going to be hard to paint, because it's hard to paint around the edges, but then I had the brilliant insight that I can just turn this whole thing over and paint it from the bottom. So I'm just going to be spending a fair amount of time wasting a lot of tape, taping these all around the edges, all around the top, taping the top basically around the edges, and then covering it with less expensive tape and paper. And then I'm going to paint flip it over and paint the edges, that dark color, just to do it. The taping of this isn't going to take forever, so I'm going to move on to the command station assembly. Why do I keep putting stuff in this box? Because I want to see the picture. I need to put those somewhere else. Yeah, then I'm going to work on this command area. Most of this I'm going to paint I'm going to paint it the pearlescent white that I used for the Apollo model. And then I'm going to use the same dark metallic that I used that I'm going to use for the edges of this for the control panels. It'll be like a dark steel kind of color. And then this, I've got red. I'll paint that red. So pretty much what I'm going to be doing is taping and getting this ready for painting the base, and then prepping these pieces. I think I'm going to just paint them all before I assemble it. It'll just be easier to do that. And then something has to be done with the captain's chair. There has to be like a cushion on it. And I'm not sure. I think maybe I'll just spray paint that too. I'll have to look at the pieces and see what I'm getting into in terms of difficulty. So, buttons. Yeah, and then we get onto the screens. Well, I don't know what these parts are like. I'll find out when I pull them out. Usually there's a lot of prep work that needs to be done on them before they can be used. It looks, I just don't know. Live and learn. So these are the steps, the stairs. What the heck is going on with this? There's a sort of debris is stuck on the end of this. Did I not? I missed one of the sprues. Okay, fortunately it looks like it's on an edge that's going to be painted. Yeah, when I was cleaning these, I just missed one altogether. That is totally weird. Huh. I don't know how I did that. So I'm going to be painting the bottoms of these as well. I could just leave it with the primer, but I'm not. Especially since I have to clean this off. Well, that's just really so very odd. Yeah. Good enough. And this cardboard, this looks, after I finish spray painting this cardboard will be retired. I'll probably reuse this one to paint the bottoms. Get this all set up. This tape? Yeah, this tape is almost the perfect width. Close anyway. A little bit wide. I don't really have anything else, I don't think. Everything else is really narrow. 6mm. And the 6mm tape is just a little too narrow. I'm trying to hit like a B minus on the quality of this model, so it's not. I'm not going to be striving for a solid A like I was striving for a solid A with the Savoia, for example. So I think I can just put it on like this. As long as it doesn't curl up and I, spray it around the edges, it'll be okay. Convincing myself that this is a good use of tape. Yeah, you would think that I could put a piece of tape on something. You would think that, you might think that I was competent enough to simply put a piece of tape on something, but you would be wrong. And then I made it the tiniest bit short. So far, this is going like everything else, not terribly well. Not terrible. Not terrible, but not terribly well. Why terribly well? That's kind of a weird phrase, isn't it? Why would something go terribly well? You know, a lot of idioms and phrases and things are pretty odd. They don't make any sense when you take them literally. Right? That's pretty much true in any language, isn't it? That when you do literal translations of idioms, you just get nonsense. Kind of like gibberish. It makes no sense at all. But I'm not here to be like a linguist. There are people who make a living, somehow or other they're able to make a living just talking about, you know, weird things in people's languages. This one's too big. This is probably like a real waste of time because I'm going to be painting the bottoms of these that you pretty much aren't going to be able to see. And I told myself that I wasn't going to get real compulsive about this model in terms of build quality, but here I am. Here I am doing that, being kind of compulsive about the build quality. Putting tape on something so I can paint the bottoms that no one will see. Maybe it helps to put the tape on the painted side, which is the part that I want to be not painted. Good thing I'm not doing anything. Oh yeah, maybe you should keep it on camera too. Maybe it's a really good thing I'm not doing anything that is like requires eye-hand coordination today. I am not demonstrating the existence of eye-hand coordination. Okay, this is going to be just me flopping around, you know, not being able to get tape on things there. Use up like $4 worth of tape doing this. Which is, you know, it isn't that much, but since I have no budget for this stream, there's none, you know, it's like whatever you need, you got to come out, get it out of pocket, kind of. Actually, taping the rest of that's going to be kind of a pain because it's not it's just like these little segments of straight lines. There's hardly any. So I'll be taking little bits of tape and going all the way around it. I'm going to have to be patient. So this stream is going to be an exercise in being patient. Because I'm just pushing it down so that the tape is adhering to the edges. We want, it's okay if brown shows on the dark. I don't want the dark to come around. I'm just going to take these off and do it the right way, I guess. Yeah. I've got 3 hours today, so I don't really have anything I need to accomplish. other than getting these ready to be painted and then getting the parts out for the captain's chair thing. The command chair, the big swivel chair. Everybody else gets little crappy chairs. That just sort of gets scattered all over the place. What this shows is that even if I'm just trying to build a model with like a B quality, you know, not even aiming for B plus necessarily, even that, the prep work takes a long time because all of these parts had sprues attached that needed to be filed and sanded. In order to get them painted, I do this taping to masking. It's called masking tape because it's masking the paint that I'm trying to not paint. I'm sure this will all be worthwhile. I'm sure this will make for a much okayer model. I just wanted to go over the edge just a little bit. I should take my glasses off. I keep saying that because I can't see close up with my glasses on. I used to have trifocals, okay, and I couldn't see close up at all because the only spot on the lens was this tiny little spot at the bottom of the lens. It's the only spot on the lens that would focus close up. And it's really hard to get that, you know, in any kind of alignment because I'd have to look like this in order to look down through it. These glasses don't even have that. It was so useless. I just said, no, don't even bother putting it on these glasses. If I want to see something close up, I'll just take my glasses off like that. Because I can, unlike most people of my age, I can see things close up, but not far away. Most people of my age are, at this point, farsighted. They need glasses to see things close up. That's why you see people holding stuff out like this, because they can't see it up close. They have to hold it out to read like a... Well, it used to be. There used to be these things called newspapers, you know, that were real papers, and people would read them by holding them, and they have to hold them far away in order to see them clearly. But my eyes are nearsighted, so I can see things close up, but not at a distance. Yeah, you can see this is going to take a while of me muttering about which parts of my eyes work at what distance and that sort of thing. All just so that these edges I painted a darker color than the top to match the box top. Good way to use up, like I said, $4 worth of tape. This modeling tape is pretty expensive compared to like this, which is like just the tape you use when you're painting walls and stuff in a home. But I use this on the painted surfaces because it has been proven not to lift the paint off. Whereas the other stuff sometimes will pull the paint away from the otherwise already painted surface. I was actually always planning to do this since I started looking at the box top on the model. I wasn't planning it to take this long. This is a lot of surface area. The circle just goes on and on forever. I haven't even finished. I'm just finishing half of it now. This is don't get impatient. There's nothing that absolutely has to be done on this model. It'll get finished when it gets finished. And then I'd have to decide to move on to something else that's probably much more complicated and challenging for over the winter. I was going to build a model of the non-existent Aurora, kind of a Mach 5 or 6 spy plane that was rumored to exist. There's no evidence that it ever did exist. The Aurora project. There's no, like anything else, you can't prove a negative. Prove it didn't exist, the conspiracy theorists would say. It's like, how can I prove something doesn't exist if it doesn't exist? See? You can't, so it did. So ages ago I bought this model. I thought it was kind of funny. It was a very small scale, like 1/44th or something, pretty small model. Look at that, there's some dirt there. Well, that'll have to be a flaw, an unintentional flaw in the deck. Somebody spilled something, I guess. If I were really compulsive, I would sand that off. I'd give that a little spritz of paint. Maybe I will. I'm going to fix that now while it's still a thing that needs to be fixed. Why? Just because it's because. Grab one of these not very good brushes that I hardly ever use otherwise. Okay. The things you do to make a model look like something. Okay, where did it go? I'm looking for the paint that I used to paint this. No. It's right where I left it. Okay, so there's a little dot there. This is where there was some sort of dirt stuck on it or something. I've used this technique before. It kind of works. Let's see if it works. Spray some paint in a container. Get a tiny bit of it on the tip of the brush and touch it to the surface. There. So I've got paint spray and a brush, a dirty brush. dry pretty quickly, and no one will ever know. Well, they will. They'll know that there was a flaw in the paint there. And there's now a little patch in the carpet where somebody scuffed it during a red alert or something, and then it needed to be patched. It's the backstory of the patch in the carpet. So I think what I'm going to be finding out today, this is going to be kind of annoying actually, is that most of the detail on the control panels of this model were decals that there's just like this inset rectangle on the model, on the display panel. So you get all these multicolored little buttons and stuff, just like on the box top, but not on the captain's chair. It's raised surfaces. I was really kind of unpleasantly surprised by that. They are raised surfaces on the model. And they need to be painted. So I'll be painting tiny little buttons and stuff. At least that's what I expect to find. When I get those parts out later in the stream, I'm going to have to squint and lean forward. My large print, on Friday I lost my large print chat screen, one that I can see without glasses at a distance. There were updates of all sorts of everything, including the web browser that we use that displays it. And as a result of the update, it just disappeared. And I had a set of instructions that tell me how to restore it in the event of disappearance. But over time keeps marching on, and time is still marching on. They got misplaced or displaced or placed somewhere other than where they were before, and I couldn't find them, and so I haven't bothered Alexis I haven't bothered her to fix my large print's chat screen yet. And then she'll come down and sigh and go, "You just push this button here that says," I don't know, it probably says restore chat screen or something like that. I'm sure it doesn't. There isn't one like that, but I'm sure she'll find it and point it out to me, and I'll say, "I didn't see that," and she'll say, "No, of course not." And then it'll be fixed. And then it'll break again, and I won't. And then that little, the magical fix-it button will have disappeared again. It's happened several times. You just do this thing, but that wasn't there. Right. I believe you. If any of you have elderly parents, you know what that's like. You always have to say, yeah, I believe you. It wasn't there, but now it is. You have to say it in a very calm but slightly condescending tone of voice. That's part of the requirement is the correct condescending tone of voice. Covering up your exasperation. There was this one commercial, I can't remember what it was for. So many commercials nowadays, you don't know what they're for. You know, the people who make them get all caught up in their own cleverness. Oh, this is so clever. You know, and they forget that maybe they're trying to sell a product. So people can remember the commercial, you know, because it was like, I don't know, somebody doing something silly. You know, and you say, oh, remember that commercial where this guy did this? I said, yeah, what was that for? I don't know. It was a funny commercial, though. Yeah, so the ad people get so caught up in their own cleverness that they forget that you're actually supposed to remember the product that they're selling. When I was growing up, that didn't really happen. There were always, commercials always had jingles, short little things that stuck in your head, tunes that included the name of the product, and you never forgot. I mean, you never forgot the name of the product. I mean, if you ever wonder where the yellow went, you know, that means that you were brushing your teeth with Pepsodent, because that's what the jingle was. You'll wonder where the yellow went when you brush your teeth with Pepsodent. Don't broadcast bad breath. This radio tower with these, you know, waves emanating from it. Or Bucky Beaver says, use Ipana. I don't even know if Ipana exists anymore. I don't know if Pepsodent exists anymore. I don't know if any of those do. But, you know, at least you knew what they were selling. The point was, you know, to keep the name of the product in mind, not the weird thing that the advertising people thought was going to be really clever, that you ended up remembering, but not the name of the thing that they were trying to sell. Okay, so what's going to happen here is I don't want to waste good tape on this. I'm going to be cutting out little pieces of paper and sticking them on. I really need narrower tape. I don't want to put this tape directly on the paint, so what I want. If you weren't living on a no budget, you know, like if you actually had money and you were doing this kind of thing, this is way too wide. Why did I pull this out? Let me see if I've got some narrower tape. No. I do. It's 1/4-inch tape. Maybe I should just use that. I don't know. I bought this. I bought this for the Lotus Ford model because the tape that I was just using, this kind of yellowish tape, is in millimeters, and the stripe on the Lotus Ford needed to be 1/4 of an inch exactly. And so I bought this blue tape, which is like the painter's. It's like this tape, except it's narrower. It's 1/4 inch. In order to get 1/4 inch tape. And the only way to get it was to buy like 3 rolls at a time. So now I've got this gigantic roll of 1/4 inch tape that I'll never need for anything else. So here I am, I'll use it for this. It's okay for that. This is, precision modeling here. Yeah, so I was talking about back in the day when you knew what commercials were for, because they just kept repeating the name of the product. That was especially true of radio advertising. Yeah, believe it or not, there was this thing called radio, which is a lot like streaming and podcasts in that it was only sound. Okay, there wasn't any picture. So you have some way of relating to it. And before television, and then television was that picture thing that came before streaming. You'd watch it on these tiny little screens with very bad definition, with no color. It was all gray tones. That would be the kind of thing that would just be intolerable nowadays, I imagine. So there's still a channel on satellite radio, whatever. I don't know who. You probably don't have that either, but listen to it in the car, because you can get the channels wherever you travel, and you don't have to keep trying to find new channels. I could talk about that. I could talk about what it was like trying to find a radio station while traveling cross country. It was actually that was an event, trying to find a station. Sure, I can talk about that, but what I was saying, though, is that the radio ads repeated the name of the product over and over and over and over. Like there'd be a 20-second ad or something like that, and they might say the product name 5 or 6 times, because they knew that they were just trying to sell this stuff and not just demonstrate how clever they were in terms of the ad. So here's a used to thing. So it used to be that if you wanted a radio in your car, you'd have to pay a premium. It was an option. Cars did not come with radios as standard equipment. It was an extra cost. That was actually true of a lot of things on cars. You see the window sticker, right? You see they still have those. They've kind of a throwback thing. There's a sticker on the window. It's called a sticker. It's just a piece of paper that is, adhering to the window that lists the price and the stuff that's on it. And nowadays, it still lists everything, to make it look like you're getting something for your money. So it'll have a list of like 30 different things, stuff like left rear tire, right rear tire, wheel inside the tire. The more things it lists, even though it's kind of silly because you wouldn't have a car if you didn't have them, they'll still list them because it makes it look like you're getting, like I said, a bunch of stuff for your money. But then there's just, included with package kind of thing. Supremo Package X or whatever. They have to give it a nice name, make it sound like you're getting... There's all sorts of XLs and SLs and things. There are certain letters that apparently people think are really, superior letters for car stuff. There's always an SL. That's kind of the semi-luxury kind of thing, and then there's an XL, which isn't extra large. It just makes it seem like it's better. I think the SL is like the sporty kinds of things, and the XLs are kind of the luxury kind of things. It's almost a convention. There's SELs. There probably is some sort of convention for the use of these letters in car branding, because they all seem to use the same letters to signify the same sorts of things, pretty much. But yeah, there was a time when they not only listed all of those things, but everything it listed had a price. So there'd be like 30 items on the sticker, each of which had its own price, because they were all optional equipment. Everything was optional equipment, practically. Even sort of semi-luxury cars like Thunderbirds and Cadillacs and stuff. If you wanted a heater in your car, you had to pay extra for it. We used to joke, it was almost like, oh, you want doors? You want doors that open and close? You want doors with windows? You want the windows to open and close? Those are the kind of questions. Each one of those was kind of extra. It wasn't quite that bad, but it was pretty close. But radios were always an option. Nothing was ever really standard. Usually the radio was an AM radio. AM FM radios that got both AM and FM signals. That was an expensive option. And the cars had external antennas. You probably don't remember that. But yeah, there are these metal antennas that were on the outside of the car. And you could, they were telescoping. Almost always they were telescoping, so you could push them up and down. If you ever went to a car wash, which was a real extravagance, you'd usually wash your car just in the driveway with a hose and a sponge. Go to a car wash and you have to remember to push the antenna down. And then those got fancy. Fancy dancy. And they came with little motors in them, so that when you turned the car off, the antenna automatically went down, because it was a thing to do. Petty vandalism was a thing to do, to go around and break off antennas. There's a whole aftermarket of antenna replacements. As young punks, those were punks then. Young punks would go around and snap off your antenna. But then motorized antennas came that when you turn the motor off, they went down. Telescope down into the car. It was really pretty clever. Like most things electromechanical back then, they broke right away. The little motors and whatever it was inside, the kind of bungees or something. They would break and your antenna wouldn't go up and down. The next big advancement was they started putting the antenna in the windshield. It was embedded in the glass. So if you looked, there was this thin metal line that went just under the rear view mirror. I remember people grumbling about that because it was not as good as the telescoping antennas in terms of, it just wasn't as good at picking up the signals from the radio waves. Reception was poor, but, people didn't break them off or steal them. So there was that. But that was all part of the, the hardware for the radio. So if you were traveling in anywhere, which you usually did in a car, but there were these long road trips that, when one was a kid, it was, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" That was a deserved thing, because it would take hours and hours to get to a place, and as a kid you didn't know what it was or why you were going, or it was a thing you were excited about getting to and you were impatient and wanted to get there. Or worse yet, it was a place you didn't want to go to, and it took forever to get there anyway. But, you wanted to listen to things on the radio. Well, radio signals didn't really carry all that far, especially the FMs, the FM stations. And so one was always searching for a radio station that was more than just static. And, usually you'd find one, but they were frequently disappointing. Okay, like you'd be looking for rock music and all you could get was, 1940s swing or talk radio. There was a lot of that then too. Sometimes if you were traveling like on a Sunday, all you could get were religious services on your radio, which when you're like 8 years old and you don't want to be going where you're going and the trip is taking forever, that's not really what you want to be listening to on the radio. Or if you're a teen, you're trying to hit the latest tunes, that isn't what you want to be listening to, but that's what it was. So he'd be searching for stations constantly as one was driving, as one would, drop out of reception and just too far away, you can't get it anymore. Trying to find the next station. But a lot of these earlier radios, especially on the cheap cars that we got, not the real fancy cars. We didn't get real fancy dancy cars. They didn't have like scanning functions on the radios. What I mean by that is that you couldn't just push a button and it would just keep changing channels. It would move along the channel spectrum until it found one, or it thought it found one, that wasn't just static. I mean, there was a knob on the radio that you had to turn the knob. This probably, I was doing all this off camera, wasn't I? Oh, well. Yeah, you had to turn the knob to find a station, and then it wouldn't come in right away, or there'd be a commercial and you didn't know what you were really getting until the commercial ended. And then you'd be disappointed and have to keep searching. It wasn't a particularly safe thing to be doing, I have to say, because if you're driving, it wasn't a great idea to be reaching over to the radio and playing and fiddling with the knob on the radio to try to find a station that, was more than just static. One of the many reasons why cars back then were not as safe as they are now. But yeah, you had to do that. You had to manually reach over and turn the knob to get from station to station to try to find one that had tolerable reception and tolerable content. And then you finally found one, like maybe it was a baseball game that you really wanted to pay attention to. So, oh, wow, I got the game. But then, it'd be the top of the 8th inning. The bases would be loaded. No one would be out. Your team's behind by 2 runs. And then all you get is static. The station just went out of range. That would happen. Then you're frantically searching for another station that was playing the game, but you've traveled outside of the area where anybody cared about it. And then then you wouldn't know what happened, and then you find out later that someone hit a grand slam and you missed it. Ticked off because that's what car radio technology was like. So satellite radio, I mean, to the extent that it's reliable, that wouldn't happen. You'd have the game on and it'd just be on. There are other weird things about traveling with the car radio. The FM stations, the range back then wasn't very far. So if you had an FM radio at all, not all cars did, you'd be searching for the sounds. If you did get them, the reception was usually better than the AM stations. Less static. You could actually kind of understand what they were saying, that kind of thing. But you could get on the AM stations, you could get this weird bounce, where the signals would be, especially if it was cloudy, I guess, where the AM signals would bounce off the clouds. And it was possible, as you were tuning the radio, to get a station from a place that was 800-900 miles away. So you'd be driving through Iowa and you'd be listening to a station from Pittsburgh, that kind of thing. That was always kind of fun. Not that you were maybe really interested in what was on the radio, but it was just kind of fun picking it up from a long distance like that. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. So now I've got a pile of little tape rolls in the way there. So what I can do with this, I was a little bit concerned because this cardboard is abrasive, is, did I really want to put the painted surface down on the cardboard? But then I'm looking at it and say, that's not a problem because the painted surface is covered over with paper and tape. So that's not an issue. Just need to make sure that the tape hasn't curled up around the edges. Or that it's over the edge. What? So I can flip this over and then go around the edge, make sure that the tape hasn't rolled up onto the edge. And then what I'll be doing is I'll just be spraying the edges. I'll be wasting, with the spray paint, just wasting huge amounts of paint, painting the cardboard. I want to get the edges, so I'm going to spray down onto it this way. And then these guys, if I cut that cardboard off, I can probably make it fit inside this. No, I'll just paint them separately. Put this in the inside. There. So as I'm painting that edge, I can paint this edge. So I'll do this either tonight or tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, I will take all of that tape and paper off and throw it away. It'll become waste. And the circle will be done. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get up and walk away around a little bit. I did a lot of that last week, didn't I? Getting up and walking around as I'm trying to do something else. But the thing I'm going to be trying to do is get ready to work on the command station thing here. In order to do that, I'm going to clear some space out on my workstation here. Put the blue tape away. Cleaning up the work surface. This piece of cardboard, okay, is now going to be, after this is painted, is going to become trash. but it needs to be out of the way. At least for now. And I need to get a new one. I've got some here that are cut to shape. There's a brand new clean work surface. But I'm going to not do that. I'm going to use this side. I don't know what was in here. There was a heavy object inside this box at some point that required a team lift. Heavy object team lift required 6 feet. Door. So I don't know what it was, but I don't remember what it was. It was big and heavy. It required a team lift, and it had a door on it. That much I know, because that's on the box. All right. I need to find these parts. Okay. And get them prepped and figure out what the best way is to get them ready for construction. And those parts will be in the box, which I very carefully set somewhere aside. There it is, way over there. Goodbye. I'll be back in a second while I get the box. There's the box of parts. And I can get my saw. And I'm going to find these things. This isn't it. This is pure trash. There is part of it. That's this bit here, back of the chair. So as I suspected, most of the control panels and displays and everything are decals, but on the captain's chair, on the arms, they are just raised bits that call out to be painted. And not decaled. I don't know why they didn't use decals there. It's right in the center of the model. The decals are so much easier than trying to paint the detail. And I think the same is true of this, the home and navigation control panel, that's going to have raised detail on it as well. I'll have to make some sort of decisions about brand new cardboard. I don't want to scar it up already. About how to paint those. Most of the, show you some of the decals. Why not? I'll just keep meandering back and forth. So most of these, have all these like red and yellow and green and blue, the primary colors. See, there are all these little buttons and stuff on them, right? All around, everywhere, except on the captain's chair. Well, not exactly. Decals number 2 and 3. These are on the control panel, okay? These are really clever things, but on the arms and the center of the panel, not so much. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I wasn't looking forward to doing that kind of detail painting on this model. I mean, I've done it on other models, but I didn't think I would have to do it on this one. My little blurb says working on the holiday. This is Labor Day in the U.S. It's one of the very few mandatory national holidays. Sometimes they're called bank holidays because the only place that was closed were banks. But yeah, bank holiday. What are these circle things? I wonder what those are. Like bases. I don't know. This is the captain. This is the base or the chair. There's a thing that goes under this and into that, and it rotates. Actually, the chair swivels. It's an action model. You can swivel your chair. These guys, it's kind of creepy, really. Okay, these disembodied bodies, and then these floating heads. So the minifigs need to be cemented together. They're really kind of weird looking. But Sulu kind of looks like Sulu. Spock kind of looks like Spock, and Kirk doesn't look like Kirk. He just doesn't. I'm not sure what was going on there. There's some speculation that Shatner didn't want his image to be molded in plastic or something. These are not parts of it. Okay, this is awkwardly put together. What does that little tag say? No. This is made in Dyersville, Iowa. 5204 something. It's an Ertl model made in Iowa. I did not. Now I know. So back when this was made in like 1991 or something, it was made by some people in Iowa. This is the base. This goes under the chair, kind of like this. And then it goes on here, and then it just swivels. Which is interesting. I mentioned this before. Watching the show, I don't think I'd ever seen the captain's chair swivel. I don't think it was a thing. This whole thing would be easier to work with if it were cut in half. I could just snap this here. Yeah, there. These are pieces. I'm not using these pieces at the moment back into the box, which is there, sort of on the screen. Yeah, as I suspected, this is the top of the control panel, and there's little decals that go here and here. But all of these switches need to be painted, I guess. And then there's just this flat space here. I don't know what, there's just nothing there at all. It looks really weird. Maybe that's what, like if you have room service, there should be a cup holder there. That would be a good thing to have. But I'm not sure where it looks almost empty. Here's the navigational control board. Oh, there's a decal that goes on that. That's cool. Right here, but then this isn't. There's detail here too that demands some sort of painting. So I think, yeah, these are the remaining pieces. There's the navigational control board, the helm pedestal, which sort of looks like that, the top and the bottom of the navigation helm and navigation control panel. Okay. We'll just start taking these apart. These are the only parts of the entire model, I think, yeah. All of the rest of the controls and everything are decals that just go into, they're just little inserts like this. And just get the decal inside the lines. It's sort of a question of whether the lines need to be painted the contrasting colors or not. That would be, that's going to be more than I want to do with this model. But these control panels that are not decaled but could have been pose a little bit of a challenge, I think, in terms of deciding what to do with it. Okay, I'm just gonna, this is tearing up this paper. It's not doing any good. I'm going to move over here. I'm gonna move the camera here. Why didn't I think of that? Thanks, camera guy, for thinking of that. And then I can cut these off over the UPS or the barcode sticker here. So I'm going to make some decisions about painting. I'm thinking I might just paint these before assembly. I'll show you the box top, and there isn't any painting guide that came with this. Okay. Sometimes models come with painting guides, but this one didn't. Even the Lotus Ford, where everything was chrome plated, came with a painting guide, like paint over the chrome. So why chrome plated to begin with? I don't know. Stupid. This doesn't come with any painting guide, so I'm just going to use the box top because, you know, what else is there? And I'm using approximations of those colors. Just looking at the instructions, you can see them. Mr. Spock's head, Spock's body, Sulu's body, Mr. Sulu's head, Mr. Spock, Mr. Sulu, but Kirk's body is Captain Kirk's head, and Kirk's arms. Kirk's arms come separate, so I guess they can be posed, or it just didn't mold right because he's sitting. This is kind of tough plastic. I'm glad I'm sawing this. If I tried to break them off or cut them with a razor, it really would have it would have made a mess. There. All the pieces are off now. I can ask my camera person to kind of reorient things, I guess. There's the pieces. No, this was this was out of the way in a place where I wasn't sure, remembering where I put it. So I'm going to put it back. And when it comes time to get the next pieces out, I won't remember where I put it, and I'll have to be looking all over the place. Like, where did I put it? I don't know. It's just over there. You would think that I could just look up and remember that it was there, but that's not how this works anymore. Oh. Okay, well this is now going back to filing and sanding and dropping stuff, and just set this someplace where it's sort of safe, sort of. I'll never remember where that is now, right? File, there's some sandpaper yet. Most of what I'll be doing is getting the sprue detached from these pieces, and then the edges, there's like little flashings around the edges that need to be sanded off. There, I'll take a digression. You can see that almost all of this, not that chair, but almost all of this is kind of like a silvery white color, and I'm going to paint it the same color as the exterior of the Apollo, which is kind of a pearlescent white. It's not going to look like that, but I think it'll look okay. I mean, whatever. Oh, I said the forbidden word. The real question is the seat. So the seat, should the seat cushion be a different color? And I'm kind of thinking the answer to that is yes. So I'm going to paint this whole thing the pearlescent color, and then I'm going to paint the detail on these things here, which should just be decals. There should just be an inset there, and a decal should go over it, but it didn't. And then I can tape it. I can put tape along the bottom edges, and wrap around it in the back. And then it would actually really be easier to paint the seat cushion first, okay, and then tape that. It'd be easier to put the tape down along here on the inside than taping up on the outside and the back. I might just brush that on. I might just brush paint this bit. Because the edges, I'm just thinking that the edges, the cushion one color, but the frame a different color. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a little ways away before I get to that. Okay, I'm going to put this paper towel down here just to catch all the dust. I have this nice new clean cardboard with a warning that it's heavy, and I don't need to mess it up, so I'm just going to use that paper towel to catch the dregs, the dust. File it down close to the surface but not on it. Try not to have scratch marks everywhere. And then sand it off. Because the sprue, shows. So, got to talk about radios in cars. I'll keep talking about radios in cars. So the important thing to remember is that the radio was an extra. It was an option. You had to pay extra to get a radio in the car at all. Otherwise, there was just seriously just a blank spot on the dashboard where the radio would have gone. Just like now, because they were, options, there were aftermarket radio places. It was very difficult to get a radio into a car until really the 1960s, because the transistor radios were not a thing until the pretty much until the 1960s. And, if you wanted a radio in the car, it was vacuum tube based, so it was big and bulky. Took up a lot of space. It had to come in and out because the tubes would burn out. You had to replace tubes with some frequency. So it wasn't until then, until the transistor radios started coming out, that you could really get kind of fairly reliable compact radios in cars. Probably the late 50s, probably it would have been like that. Early 60s. I remember when transistor radios came out, portable ones, things you could carry around, these little pocket-sized, literally pocket-sized radios. It was a huge deal. Kids all had to have one. And there were competitions about how many transistors does your radio have. Like, it didn't much matter. No one cared about how many stations or what the sound quality was. It was in elementary school when these things started coming out, probably like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, something like that. So it wasn't, can you get this station on your radio? And that wasn't what it was. You would think maybe that would make sense, that you'd say, can you get this station on your radio? No, mine doesn't get that station. Oh, you got a crummy radio. Don't your parents love you? That kind of thing. But no, it wasn't a competition like that. It was how many transistors did your radio have? That was the thing that mattered. I don't remember how many transistors all these radios had. 6, 8. However, whatever it was, somebody had one with one more transistor than yours had. So their radio was more transistory. Yeah, you could carry these around. It was pocket radios. I don't know why. Was it the iPod or something that came out? I don't see that was a terrible, significant improvement over little pocket radios we had. But then, yeah, you got transistors, and then the car radios, were smaller and more reliable. The reception still wasn't any good. The reception depended on the antenna, which was a telescoping chromed metal rod on the outside of the car. And you still had to turn the dial. Then fancy stuff started coming out. Fancy radio improvements. Well, one huge fancy radio improvement was the FM, AM, FM radio. You got both AM and FM. That was a huge thing. Not that the FM reception was terribly good, but you could at least get it on your radio. Switch between AM and FM. Yeah, there's this phrase, everybody, 97.3 on your radio dial. And you go, nowadays, what do you mean radio dial? I mean, I understand the 97.3 kind of. Nobody, the number of the station was really important, because that's that would show up on your radio as, the little bar that went across the dial with the numbers. It wasn't a dial. The dial was the knob that you used to tune it to a station. But you could tell what station you were at, because there was like a bar with numbers across, with AM on on the top or the bottom, and FM on the other side, either the top or the bottom. I'm not sure if there was a convention for that or not. Like, was the AM always on top and the FM always on the bottom, or vice versa? I'm not sure. What is up with the back of this chair? I just ran my finger across it. Look at that. It's got random spots. Well, that's not good. I'm glad I caught that. It's really bad. I have to sand those off. I'm just polishing the edges here to get Yeah, it's really odd. I don't know if you can see it on camera. The light catches it right, but there's just like random dots all across the back of the chair. I'm not sure what that's about, but I'm going to sand it down. Make them go away. Yeah, but people always talked about that on your radio dial, because you had these knobs that you had to turn that moved the tuner in the inside of the radio, and you could see the indicator bar move from left to right across the different numbers, which allowed you to, to tell you kind of what station you were at. So if you're looking for 97.7 or something, you could get it approximately to 97.7 on the indicator. And sometimes, the station would come in. If they were just local stations, you could do that. The radios came with presets buttons. There's usually, they're between like 4 and later on, maybe up to 7. It was a fancy thing too, where you could tune to a station. You could pull the button out, I think. There was kind of a ritual you had to follow to make it work. Like you'd pull the button out, move the indicator using your radio dial to move the indicator to the station you wanted, fiddling around with a little bit until it was mostly not static. And then you push the button in, or vice versa. I can't remember which it went, but you followed the ritual. And then in the future, if you wanted that station, you just pushed the button and it would move it. It was a physical movement. It would move the tuner to that station. That way you could have between like 4 and 7 favorite stations that you could get to by just pushing a button. That was a pretty significant advance. So you probably are noticing now that the tuning into a station was a mechanical thing. Okay, you were actually moving parts using a knob to move something inside the radio to pick up stations. But then another huge innovation that came along was, instead of mechanically turning a knob to move something inside the radio, showing an indicator bar against against an array of numbers, was electronic tuning. That was a huge thing, where instead of like a bar moving along an array of numbers to show you what station you were listening to, there was a numerical display, because the tuning was happening electronically. You'd still have to turn a dial. You'd still turn a knob on your radio to tune it. And you'd still have buttons. Okay, those would still work that way. But the tuning wasn't a mechanical process any longer. And the next thing that permitted, this was a big deal, is you could have a button that would search for a station. Okay, you'd push the button and it would just electronically move through the next stations sequentially until it found one. It could tell if it was getting reception or not. Okay, until it found one that actually got reception. Sometimes not very good. Sometimes it was still a lot of static. But instead of having to turn the knob, and go past the station, go back, you went past it. Okay, you just push this button and it would scan and move on to the next station. That was a pretty big deal, especially if you were traveling and trying to, moving from one station with reception to the next, instead of having to slowly turn the dial so that you didn't skip over a station that was actually working, but it would jump to that station. Pretty fancy schmancy stuff. So the preset feature still worked. You could still do the button thing. I don't like that. I'm going to just sand that off. It's a ridge across the top of the chair. Maybe between the cushion and the frame. I don't know, but I think it's just excess plastic. It's just not, because it's not uniform all the way across the top. There, no, it's just one. No, it's just straight. Yeah, so I got to live through all of these massive improvements in radio technology if one had spent the extra money to put a radio in your car. Yeah, but I remember the extensive and frequently futile efforts of scanning through, turning the dial on the radio, trying to find a station that wasn't static or wasn't what we would call a televangelist, right? And as one was driving along on longer trips, just, finding what you wanted, and then it would, I like that station, and then it was gone. And you'd have to find another one. And there were just some places where there just wasn't anything at all. You just couldn't get anything on the radio. Guess those are part of it. Yeah, I'm glad I caught the back of that. That was so weird, running my finger across and then having all those little points. So with the chair, the big question is, I am going to paint the cushion, the seat cushion, some sort of like dark gray, I think. Do I paint that first and then paint the pearl white on the rest, or do I paint the pearl white? No, I just answered my question. This is going to get primed. The seat, I'm just going to leave the seat cushion the primer color. That solves it. Okay, poof, just like that. It is solved. This whole thing gets primed. I'm going to then tape over the cushion. Okay, and that'll stay the primer color, which will be a nice color for the seat cushion, and then paint the rest of it the pearlescent white. That'll take like 6 coats. I'm using no, I guess I'll use the white primer on this. Otherwise, no, I can't use the white primer on this because I want the seat cushion to be gray. This model isn't worth using a lot of my expensive primer. I'm just going to use the Rust-Oleum on this. It'll be fine. And if I have an extra can. I bought a whole extra can of the pearlescent paint for the Apollo model, so I've got enough of that. I got enough of that to go around. Okay, what's going on with this? Yeah, okay. So this is the base of the chair. This goes on it like this, and then this goes on it. What the heck? Goes on like this. Okay. Yeah. And then that goes on like that. The bottom's got, I don't know, never going to see the bottom, I guess. Maybe. I'm going to take the time to sand off these circles in this number. Just to do it. Working on a holiday, so I'm just going to do sanding, and yeah, I got an hour, another whole hour. I'm just going to see if I can't get these prepped during this hour. Maybe if I, stop talking about car radios. But if I stop talking about car radios, then what would I use to fill the dead space? It would be like driving through the middle of a highly rural area at night trying to get to someplace the next day, and feeling kind of tired, and you'd really like to have something on the radio to help stay awake as you're driving down this narrow 2-lane highway, because that's all there were then. Narrow 2-lane highways with no shoulders. I shouldn't say that. There was like a gravel patch on either side. But usually there'd be like an inch or two drop off between the pavement and the side of the road, because, why don't I just talk about that? Because what happened was, when they made the roads, they would grade it and lay down a base coat of gravel, right? And then just pave over that. And there wasn't any paved shoulder. What it was the pavement ended. You just got to the edge of the pavement, and usually the asphalt was like 3 or 4 inches thick, and you would just drop off the edge of that asphalt onto the gravel underlayment. That was a really dangerous thing. It doesn't happen that much anymore unless you go off the paved shoulder, which we have now. But that was actually a big deal you learned about when you first learning to drive, was, the lanes were quite narrow. And if you went off the side, off the pavement, onto the non-existent, not paved shoulder, your wheels were below there was just a big bump, almost like a step, between this is not a paved shoulder and the surface of the road. And if you tried to steer back over that, the wheels would catch on the side of the road. They would catch on that raised step, go over the top of it, and then, nothing would happen as you were trying to go over this raised step, and then all of a sudden it would go over the top and you'd lurch to the left, which was a bad thing, because to the left, just 2 feet away, was the oncoming traffic. And so it was, if you somehow got one of your wheels off the pavement onto the non-existent paved shoulder, had to be very careful, to pretty much come to a stop almost, and climb carefully up over the top onto the paved surface. That's still an issue, but you'd have to go way off the road to run into that, or you have to be in, an area where the non-existent shoulder still is not there. And of course, you'd do that while you were tuning the radio by rotating the knob, trying to find a station that wasn't just static. And that's when you would reach over. You'd reach over and inadvertently turn the wheel and go off the side of the road, and then you'd try to lurch back, and you'd lurch back and come into oncoming traffic, and that's why fatality rates per mile were like 10 times what they are now. Among other things, that was one of the reasons why that kind of stuff would happen. So pushing a button to scan to the next station, station with any kind of reception, the electronic tuning of the radio, that was probably a lifesaver. It was still pretty annoying, because you push the button and it would go, and you just get something that was barely unintelligible, and then you push it again and again, and sometimes you go all the way around and it wouldn't pick up anything, or the only thing that it picked up was something you didn't really want to be listening to. That you were electronically tuning didn't create stations that were within range of your radio that you wanted to hear. But it was an improvement in the sense of, maybe not running off the road quite as much. But yeah, the roads were main highways. I mean, main highways we would consider nowadays to be fairly dangerous, very rural roads. So the main highway would not have shoulders. There was usually a ditch on either side of the road. Kind of part of it was because the roadbed was built up above the area around it. Part of it was actually they were ditches to catch runoff, for rain and stuff. So it was pretty easy to put your car in a ditch back then too, while you were trying to find something on your radio dial. Yeah, radios were lethal. Thinking about it, certainly compared to now. No, now you just you talk to it. You just say, "Hey, you radio," or whatever you call your radio. Hey, you radio, put on, and you just tell it what kind of thing you want it to listen to. You don't even have to tell it what station. Just say, play this kind of music, and chances are that might even work. You might not even have a real radio in your car. You might just be streaming off your phone into some sort of, preamp and speaker system. That could happen too. Oh yeah, then that, I still have time to rattle on. Why not? As I'm talking about this, you have your AM and FM on your radio. That was pretty fancy-dancy, having an AM FM radio in your car with electronic tuning, so you just push the button and it would scan for the next available station that claimed to have some sort of reception. What kind of amazing things happen next? Well, the kind of amazing thing that happened next is that you could play recorded music in your car. What does that mean? That means that instead of hunting for a radio station that played the kind of music that you wanted to hear, or the game that you wanted to pay attention to, or the talk radio that you wanted to listen to somebody talking about, instead of that, you could choose the music by playing recorded music. What made that possible? Well, there was a time, I do believe this is true, there was a time when you could put a record player, meaning like a real record, like vinyl, okay? When you could put a record player in your car. Well, this didn't really catch on. It was, it wasn't going to work because of bumps, okay, which bounced the needle around. But the only way you could get recorded music in a car was with a vinyl record, with a record player that would play it. That was true for a very long time, which means that it didn't happen. You were at the mercy of the radio waves, the airwaves, carrying stuff that you couldn't tune into, or at least not for very long, or you didn't want to listen to, or would fade out just when it got interesting. But what made it possible, back in the 1960s, I think it was. I can't get my dates right. I can just tell you when I remember it happening in my life. Is recorded music on tape. And I know this was a thing that was happening in the 60s, mid 60s, and definitely, mid to later 60s. It was just what happened is that not only could you then get, as an optional equipment, an AM FM radio, but you could get it either as part of an integrated unit with the radio or as a separate thing, a tape player. And there was a rivalry. I'm sure I'm not going to go into a lot of this because I'm sure it's part of lore now, between 8-track tapes and cassette tapes. 8-track tapes were also cassettes. And they called them 8-tracks because I guess there were 8 tracks on them. But, these little cassette tapes that you could put into a slot in your car and push play, and it would play the music that was recorded on the tape. And you could buy all sorts of recorded music on these, either 8 tracks or cassettes. You could buy them, or you could even record your own if you had a recorder, a tape recorder. They were called tape recorders because it recorded things onto tape. Yep. Those came out, and that was quite a deal because then, you'd keep a box of tapes in your car, and you got, that created another industry too, as the accessories, to hold the tapes in your car. There's another opportunity to drive off the road or into the oncoming lane, is fishing around for the tape that you wanted, and you ejected the tape that was already in there, and you put the new one in and played it. So you're fiddling around doing that instead of driving. So that was a thing that I am now remembering. That was a huge breakthrough. So you could just carry the music that you wanted, one tape at a time. Cassette tapes won out, 8 tracks lost. Kind of like later on when you had 3 different versions of, there were actually 3 of recorded video. That was a huge breakthrough. You didn't put that in the car though. I mean, not for the driver's side anyway, because you wouldn't want to be watching a recorded movie or something while you were driving. That would be a bad idea. There were enough bad ideas back then anyway to add more to them. Just thought I saw a flaw there that shouldn't have been there. There's something up here. It's the bottom of this panel here that goes onto it like that. And that's good. The top is going to be painted a different color than the bottom, so I don't have to worry about the seams, which don't close up very well. There's big gaps there. This was not a very well built instrument panel, I have to say. The Enterprise construction leaves a lot to be desired. Okay, well, that's the bottom of it anyway. Go ahead and do the top. So this is going to be a thing. There's little decals that go here and here inside these frames, but then there's all these little buttons and everything here that are just calling out to be, detailed by hand. And I guess I'm going to have to do that. I mean, if you look at it here, okay, this and this are decals. All of this are not. Why not? Why didn't they just put little insert panels here and put decals here and here instead of saying, oh, paint all of these things primary colors with your tiny little brush and your bad eyesight? I don't know. So it would have been a fairly relaxing kind of finishing thing, just sticking a decal into a frame is going to turn into kind of an event of detail painting. So that'll be something to look forward to on relaxing painting, or in this case, not terribly relaxing painting. To paint all those little buttons and knobs and stuff. This is the kind of thing that creates the opportunity to end up doing it 3 or 4 times, because if I mess up, I may end up just having to reprime it and start over. Who knows? I might end up having to paint this 3 or 4 times before it's finally okay. When they could have just put 2 more decals into the kit. What were they thinking, or not? Don't you think, or don't you? Yeah, and cassette players in cars, that lasted a good long time. I mean, a really long time, relative, compared to changes that happened more quickly later on. Because I remember playing cassettes, and maybe I was behind the times and not being, getting the most modern stuff. Well into the early 90s even. Because it was just, they were small. You could get a lot of music on them. They were pretty easy, eject and stick them in. They were pretty easy to use. So it wasn't until CDs replaced tapes that the technology in the car changed, and that moved along more slowly. Than it was available, commercially. You could get CD players, home CD players, and CD changers, so that you could put 3, 4, 5 CDs into this thing, and you could select one, or they could play sequentially. And it wasn't something you could really do with tapes. But by by the mid-aughts, CDs had essentially replaced tapes in cars. Still had radios, still had AM, FM radios, still had the same issues of not being able to get to your station, and having to search for one. The automatic search functions became better, but and the radio stations became more powerful, so that their signal would become, would be viable over longer distances. But it would still be, if you were traveling through, a pretty rural area and you wanted to listen to the baseball game, finding it was not easy. Especially if you were in a part of the country where your team was not their team. Okay. Well, trying to make sure that we don't have circles, molding circles all over this. This has got little bits on it too that need to be detailed. This is okay. This is getting these parts prepped will take up almost the entire stream. Which is good. So today I managed to put tape on something to do some unnecessary painting of a contrasting color that didn't need to be done. So what's I'm looking at this box top and, thinking back to the thing I just taped, not taped like in cassette tapes for recorded music, but, taped like in putting tape on. My foot up there and it cramped a little bit. I've only used the pearlescent paint over white primer. So I really don't know how it's going to go. Maybe I should test that. Maybe I should. Maybe I should test the pearlescent paint on the... Well, as long as the primer is uniform, it might just come out darker. It might be okay. I'm just not going to bother testing. I'm just going to do it. Prime all of these with the gray primer. And then spray the pearlescent paint on top of it. And then paint the detailed bits that need to be painted. And if necessary, just reprime it and repaint it. I'm going to need to take a very quick break because I just need to take a bio break. That's what it is. Just call it what it is. So I'm going to do that, and I will be back. I'm going to just let you look at this pile of little bits, and I'll be back in like 3 minutes. Okay. That's better. Just getting the flashing off the bottom of these things. All of these parts have a extrusion of plastic along the base where it oozed out at the bottom of the mold. They just all do, some more than others. This one's pretty significant. You can't really see them very well until it's painted, and then it's like, oh, why didn't I clean that up? Well, at least they didn't put molding circles here. They put them on the inside instead of like right in the middle of the back. That's where I would have expected them to put it, given the kind of thing. But this model was made later, 91 or something like that. A submarine was made in the the early 60s. The Apollo was an early 90s reissue. The Lotus Ford car was a mid 70s reissue of an original model. And a lot of the reissues just use the original molds. You know, it's kind of like, I think they find them in the warehouse. They say, oh, we found these old molds in the warehouse. And so, well, we should just use those. But they're really terrible. Yeah, I know. It'll be people who want to, relive their experience with a poorly molded model will appreciate the authenticity of the situation. So between now and Wednesday, I'll prime these, and then this is going to get painted red. Most of these parts are going to be painted that kind of pearlescent white. This is going to be painted a dark gunmetal, and the chair will have to wait because on Wednesday I'll tape it, the cushion, and then paint the pearlescent on it afterwards, because I want the seat cushion to be the primer color. I'm glad I thought of that. That will make it where does this part go anyway? Oh, this is the pedestal for this. I'm not fully understanding this. Okay. I'm just test fitting some of these things together. It looks like this pedestal. Oh, no, it goes this way. Okay, it does cover it up. It's open on the bottom. But, okay. I thought maybe there was this big opening that would end up showing after it was completed. But it looks like that gets covered up. Not very well. I mean, it's adequate, but not great. Yeah, so I went from just after radios became transistorized and for the cars. Before that, they were tube radios. They had to be because there weren't any transistors. Clunky radios that had bad reception from stations that weren't very powerful. Two transistor radios that were AM, but later on got real fancy, and you had AM, FM with hand dial tuners to automated, to electronic tuners, to scanners, and eventually the ability to play recorded music on tapes. And then CDs, so, yeah, and now you don't even have those. You don't put CD players in your car anymore. You just have streaming services. Link it to your phone and play off of that. No more cassette tapes of Christmas comedy classics. God, we listened to that over and over and over and over. Endlessly. I can still sing We Are Santa's Reindeer. We've learned to sing this year. I'm not going to do it. Nope. Stopped myself just in time. But yeah, the cassette tapes were, that was a really good thing. Because then you could play the music that you wanted whenever you wanted it, and you wouldn't have to try to search for a station that was playing something that was tolerable. If you wanted to listen to like your home team's baseball game, you still had to search for it. And then frequently couldn't find it because, you weren't anywhere near where your home team played, and they had their own home team, and they wanted to, that's what they put on their radios, the radio stations, where the home team of the place where you were traveling, not the place from which you were traveling. Sorry, We Are Santa's Reindeer is now playing over and over in my head. That was an unfortunate thing, remembering that. Did have a lot of fun singing that with the kids over and 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 over as we went from our house to my parents' house for the holidays. Kind of rivaled only with it was a lot like the Chipmunks, actually. The Santa's Reindeer sounded suspiciously like the Chipmunks, but it wasn't. They were Santa's Reindeer, not the Chipmunks. They had their own. They had their own tape. And I have to make sure to paint the inside of that because it's going to show once this is put together. You'll be able to see it. Yeah, I'm fiddling with this because there's a little flaw in the plastic, and I have to remind myself, I'm not trying to do an A-plus model here. And this is pretty close to being the last piece. Good. I'll test fit all of this and then just make sure I know what I'm doing in terms of painting. Yeah, these are all going to be primed and then painted. Oh, yeah, I'm thinking painting those. Thinking I would have to tape that, but that's a separate piece. Not like the novel, a separate piece, but like a separate chunk of molded plastic. You have to be precise so that there isn't any confusion about that which I am speaking, of which I am speaking. Well, there's a lot of, actually quite a few parts here, now that they're all just kind of laid out. So when they molded this piece, this goes down like this. No, it goes like this. Duh. It is the bottom, but the bottom still kind of shows. Yeah, it goes on like this, and then the chair sits on top of that. Okay. Just getting my orientations correct here. So I think the thought was that this is the bottom and no one's going to care. But, you know, some of these things are so raised up that you actually can see them from the side. So I'm going to sand them off. I'm sanding off the part number. But I think this is clear enough what it is that I'll be able to identify what it is. And I'm not trying to get rid of the circles, I think, completely, but they have kind of raised edges. And let's make sure they can't be seen from the side. Most of these parts a lot of these parts have to be primed on. That's on one side. That's just on one side. This is going to have to be primed. This one's going to be a pain to prime. I'm going to have to paint it like on one side and then flip it over and then do that. It's just on one. It's just on one. This one has to be primed on both sides. Bottom and top. The captain's chair is really excessive. I'm almost tempted to bring out the minifig, but the minifig is like 2/3 as wide as the chair. It's like you can't. Your arms have to be like way out in order to go on either side of this. You only comfortably be able to do one side or the other, not both. but who am I to complain about the captain's chair, right? Yeah, that should be good enough. Well, I've got enough time here. I'm going to go ahead and clean these pieces. Let me just wipe them down with a little isopropyl alcohol, and I didn't sand down the edge here. It was kind of like when I was looking at the stairs. I had actually missed one of the sprue bits completely. And I got 5 of the 6 of them done. These parts fit pretty poorly. But I'm going to go ahead and paint them before I put them together. I could do this. I could paint this, attach it together and paint it as one piece, but I'm not going to. I'm going to paint them separately and then probably just use contact cement to put them together. And if the seam shows, well, that's how the chair was constructed. Okay, let me put this stuff on. I don't think I missed any spots. If I did, I'll find them later. I can use this for the cleaning. I need a piece of cardboard onto which I can put these pieces for the priming process. And those are over there. So I'm going to get up and walk away from camera again for a little bit. And find an appropriate chunk of cardboard. It should be big enough. Yeah, this will be okay. I'll end up maybe I'll end up. No, we'll see. I was going to say, I was in the process of saying that maybe I'll end the stream a little bit early if this is all done on that time scale, but I don't know if it will or not. You can watch me wipe off the sanding dust. Pretty exciting stuff. This is a highly recommended thing. Actually, it's recommended that one wear gloves, because if one were to make a beautiful A+ model, you don't want oils from your fingers marring the surface. And so, wipe it down with isopropyl alcohol to get all the dust and oils off. And then don't touch it with your fingers. But that's how you should do it, if you're really doing it like perfect. But I'm not, and this isn't, so there. So buttons. Seriously, there should be a cover on that. Oh, duh, there is. It goes here. Okay. Yeah, I totally missed how these parts came together. And why there's a divot there. Okay, that's why there's a divot in that, because these parts fit together adequately, mediocrely. They really don't fit. Nice. Okay. I should. Holy cow. They really don't fit. I'm going to fix that now. See, what's happening here is that when this goes on the pedestal poorly, the two sides they're not symmetric. It doesn't set on there. I mean, this is like simple as all get out, but it doesn't set on there. And then this extends. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little that extends beyond that. It's hard to hold this together, but if this goes on like this and then this goes on like this, okay, like that. Okay, this extends a little bit too far, and so this doesn't fit on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that a little smaller. I guess that's one way to use up some extra minutes of the stream, is finding out that parts don't fit. I mean, a lot of these parts don't fit all that well. But that fits particularly not well. Yeah. I mean, so this goes on here one way better than the other. This just sets on there. That's not a big deal. This sets on top of this. Yeah, adequately, but not great. This goes on here, and then there's this big gap up on top, whatever that's about. But when this goes on like this, this doesn't come anywhere. This doesn't come close to fitting. It goes underneath like that. That's good. But this here, this edge here, is like a 64th of an inch too long. I'm going to file it off a little bit. It's not as radical. It's not as radical a fix as the seat on the Lotus Ford, where the model had the wrong seat altogether, and the correct seat was molded into the body, covered up by the incorrect seat, and that was just really bad. I can file this off because this piece of plastic gets totally covered. Let's see how I did here. Yeah, sometimes it's just good to play it like, how do these pieces fit together anyway? And it's, oh, they don't. Why is this still not? I took a big chunk of it off. I don't understand why. I don't see where there's a gap there. There's plenty of a gap. Now I try to hold the pieces back again. I think they're not symmetric. I think that the two sides of this pedestal are not the same. One would expect that there'd be some alignment, like some alignment pins or something, along the bottom of this to line it up, but no, there aren't any. Yep, that was actually a little spider that walked across there. Hi, little spider walking across there. Wonder if there has to be some better way to hold this that I haven't found. Well, this pedestal is just not going to, it's not going to be terrific. But it's on the bottom in the back. I wonder if I did that. Okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to put the pedestal on here because these are the seams that show. Kind of like that. And then see what happens. Yeah, what happens is that it's twisted. Here, see, those seams are there. They're tight on both sides, right? So I put this on top, and they're not symmetric. But that's how it's going to go. I'm going to attach these two together first because they'll fit nice and tight, and then these seams here, they don't show at all. And the only one that comes close to showing is the one in the back. So I'll just set that up like that. And then kind of align this as much as I can. But yeah, I mean that'll be how it'll come together. Let me put some tape down here. Most of these I can use the blue tape for because they're only being painted on one side. So that's good. I can just use cheap tape. This is going to get painted red. I'm just taping these down because when they're spray painted, the spray can actually move them around. So just a little bit of tape on the bottom, will keep them from flying around. As long as the tape doesn't come up around the edges. So these bits will all be primed. This will be painted pearl white. This is pearl. This is red. This has to be painted on both sides. This can just be painted on one side. Yeah, strip panel is on one side. I just have to remember that some of these are painted different colors later, right? This is going to be painted dark gunmetal. Okay, I'm going to use the I have to use the good tape on these because they need to be flipped over. And this I have to be careful not to pull the paint off the surface of the side that's just been painted. So in this case, I'm going to paint the bottom first, and then flip it over. No, this is the bottom. And flip it over and paint the top. And this has to be painted like in all sorts of different directions. I'm going to do it this way. This is the bottom. The bottom doesn't show. Okay, I think maybe I can get away doing that. Is just taping it on this surface as the bottom and then painting all the rest of it. I don't have to worry about the inside terribly much because, as I discovered, that gets covered up by other pieces. Okay. So these all get to be primed. And then this and this and this and this get these four pieces get painted pearlescent white. This gets painted red. This gets painted dark gunmetal. This has to come back to the shops so that the seat cover can be taped over, and then it's painted pearlescent white. And then I do the detail painting on all the switches here. I somehow do that. Instead of the decals that they could have put on it, but they didn't. Speaking of which, there's a flaw here I noticed before but didn't fix. There's a big scratch. That'll go under the decal. I didn't do that. That's just like a cut. Okay, that won't show. Okay, so priming on this, the parts that I taped early in the stream are going to be painted this color, this dark gunmetal color. So I'll be using that on a couple of pieces. I won't bother spray painting this and that until the primer's done. So there's only one part that needs to be flipped over, this one, and primed on both sides. So this will be a multi-step process. Probably do the priming yet today, and then because I'm going to have to put multiple coats of the pearlescent paint on, I just know that. Multiple coats. Wait a second. Duh. I'm doing a duh here. Okay. No, I don't have to flip this over and paint it. It goes on like this. Okay, so as long as the edges get painted, I only need to paint it on this side because the edges show, okay, right? But the rest of it doesn't. Okay, so I don't have to do anything on two sides. It's all just one-sided. There we are, ready to be primed, and then painted pearlescent, painted red, painted metallic, and then brought back for embellishment. Okay, yeah, it's about time to wrap up. So, I worked on the holiday, at least here in the States it's a holiday. For those of you who are in the States, I hope you had a good holiday. If you had the holiday off, some people have to work on the holiday. It's not a holiday for them. Thank you for the work that you're doing. For those of you who are not in the U.S., it's not a holiday for you, but you've got plenty of other holidays, so enjoy those when they come around. And I'll be back on Wednesday, and I'll be unmasking the base, the circular base, and the stair treads, and beginning probably doing some assembly on this. I'll be doing some assembly and maybe some detail painting, attempting to detail paint this control board. That might end up taking a whole lot of time, and then masking the seat on this so that I can paint the rest of this. So there could be an opportunity for all sorts of oops, I can't believe that happened kind of thing as I try to paint all of these control surfaces here that should have been decals but aren't. Yep. Thank you, AMT Ertl, for having decals for everything except right here on the control panel where it's really important. Be sure to watch our Dyson Dungeons show, because Dyson Dungeons is all about Dungeons and Dragons. I guess I can say that. Our D&D show is absolutely amazing. Catch it on YouTube, listen to it as a podcast, catch up with what's happening, and I will be back on Wednesday doing some work on this, and then moving along to the station assemblies, which are the parts that go all the way around. Well, a lot of the around that are supposed to be painted like this, and I'll have to decide how I'm really going to bother painting them. I might, it'll be a multiple step process. I'll probably paint them white. The bottoms are going to be painted pearlescent. The top's plain white. I don't know if I'm going to bother painting these screens like this or not. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll hand paint those. This is in red. I could do some messing around with this. I don't know. I'm going to see if it's worth the trouble to do that. The multi paint scheme. Once I take a look at how they're actually formed and put together, or maybe I'll just do it easy. Maybe an easy way. I don't know. Find out what will happen when it happens. So these hopefully on Wednesday will be painted. Maybe not. Depends on how the painting goes. And then I'll mess around with these control panels, do a little bit of early assembly. Hope to get the colors right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you on Wednesday as progress continues on the USS Enterprise Command Bridge model kit. See you then.